A research team led by Dr. Anthony Peratt of the main US Particle Research Center, the Los Alamos laboratories, studied 4 million of rock art images worldwide. The study, published in 2003, was an astonishing revelation and affirmation of countless world traditions on celestial phenomena which accompanied the recent planetary titanomachies, as those stated by Plato. Your tradition about Phaethon, who failed to follow his father's sun path, then burnt Earth's surface, and was killed by a bolt, though told in mythic guise, is true, inasmuch as a deviation of the celestial bodies moving past the Earth does, at long intervals, cause destruction of earthly things through burning heat. Those planetary titanomachies started just after the beginning of the current warm interglacial period 15,000 years ago. Then, a series of space Damoclean swords, electric superstorms, caused lethal mutations, together with global auroras, when there was light all the 24 hours on the Earth for weeks. The magma was stimulated, a process that was recently proved, and a 3,000 years long new glacial period followed. The ancient warnings for protection then in caves from devastating space threats were confirmed. The altruistic, peaceful humankind lived warless until then. Some of those who survived, but not recovered from the shock, became aggressive, and after new superstorms, their successors gradually started the wars, but we now have high hopes that we will stop them. Before the last superstorm that overtook us in July 2012 and could blow up all nuclear plants causing an extinction event, a proposal to forecast and repulse space threats was made. Then, NASA was forced to establish a planetary defense office, and other countries got interested, but very slowly until we hastened them. Let's start our journey in the biggest adventure of humankind, its survival from global catastrophes. %80 of the stars of our galaxy are double and some even triple. As Jupiter radiates more energy than it receives from the Sun, and both receive electricity from the center of the Milky Way, it was likely the second star in the solar system. Just recently, NASA began accepting ancient observations that celestial bodies in the solar system may have been trapped by the solar field while passing near it, thrown away from space explosions in the area where they were introduced. So the same could have happened with any planet or moon. They even have such different compositions and inclinations in the solar system. During such events, the bodies of different electric charge are changing violently charges, visible throughout their planetary neighborhood. Electrical discharges between Jupiter and its moon, Io, have been already recorded recently, reminiscent of the ancient observations of planet Jupiter superballs, whom much later aggressive invaders personified and named selfishly God to frighten, not to inspire people for protection. The main factor of the planetomachies, planet battles, constituting also 99.9% of the universe, according to NASA and all electrocosmologists, is the huge plasma rivers, electrified gases with negatively charged electrons flowing next to positive ion currents. With their sinuous collisions create the stars, galaxies, intergalactic clouds, the cosmos. Daily we live near plasma conditions such as the sun and the solar wind, lightnings, flames, fluorescent lamps, educational plasma balls, and the earthly plasma life jacket, the torus called Van Allen belts. But a large part of plasma in the universe does not shine, but moves unseen in dark mode until a collision makes it glow when approaching, for example, from space to Earth and hits as a bolt even from the blue, that is, without clouds. The current planet Saturn, who was also measured that emits more energy than it receives from the Sun, when arrived in the neighborhood of the Sun, was captured in the then solar system's limits. At that time, according to dozens of paintings and traditions, Saturn has pulled as satellites Mars and Earth in a purple sky. Sometime 14,500 to 13,000 years ago, the Earth was struck by the electric field of Saturn and a series of huge disasters erupted after magma was stimulated. It was the time when people had just arrived in all corners of the again warm Earth, when a new, very icy electrovolcanic glacial period of darkness started by the cloud cover on Earth. The dark period is recognized in many of the stories of the world's evolution, is registered in the corresponding picture books of Central America, and is now called Older and Younger Dryas. The column of the planets then composed from top to bottom Uranus, Neptune and his satellite Venus hidden above Saturn, and under Saturn from top to bottom Mercury, Mars and Earth. Over the next 7,000 years, the Earth was traveling under the center of Saturn in the purple sky, wandering all around the Sun, but he would not be seen from Earth. The planets, dominated by the giant form of Saturn, were standing above the northern horizon. 6,000 years before present, another series of superstorms began, which for over 3,500 years caused the following serious events. Initially, when Saturn's electric field touched the Jupiter's one, they exchanged huge electrical discharges. Saturn lit up more strongly than the Sun. The explosion produced Saturn's rings, and while losing his coma, Venus was thrown, passing by Earth, as a separate new Sun satellite. That's why she remains hotter than Mercury, although farther from the Sun. For people on Earth, this was the beginning of a new era. Saturn universally dubbed Helios worldwide. The representation on Parthenon of Athena's birth from the head of Zeus, the planet direction from which Venus originated, is a reminder of this event. From that view probably comes the scenery by Euripides in his theatrical play Vakhes. They carried fire on their tresses without being burned. The torches remind the defense in the dark by the coma of the initially comet Venus, while the combination of ionic and doric elements stresses the valuable mutual aid. At the other pediment, the fight between Poseidon and Athena is about the turmoil before and the tranquility after the passage of the comet near Earth. After Saturn crashed, he maintained a plasma stream in connection with the Earth. The impressive rock paintings and ancient customs which survive in the area around the Pangeo mountain Greece are potential recordings to recall these cosmogonic events that people for millennia took care to preserve for future generations. Numerous such traditions led the great Heraclitus to say, "Lightning rules the universe," that is, that space electricity steers everything. The Sun, the current Sun, illuminated a portion of the edge of Saturn in a crescent shape, which seemed from the Earth to rotate around Saturn on a daily basis. 1,000 years later, 5,000 years before present, the Saturnian column of the planets broke, with major planets to move away from the Sun, while Venus and Earth moved in overlapping internal tracks. That break caused an unimaginable flood. Stories about floods exist in over 500 independent traditions, all with the same details. Survivors included people in the mainland, those already living on the slopes of the mountains with pro-forest autarky. From them come the survival customs during deluges, as that one from Cyprus. Jupiter, which revolved around the Sun as an inner planet so far, then retreated into the sky, surrounded by a coma visually 3 times larger than the diameter of the Moon. Beneath the south pole of Jupiter, a gigantic outpouring of plasma extended, which made it look like Jupiter was based on a mountain. Over the planet there were much smaller corneous endings. He looked like a man with a jacket and was also seen as the bull of heaven. Jupiter maintained the plasma outflow until he entered the asteroid belt around 5,000 years ago, where the coma was reduced in size and changed shape. Mars and Mercury, who had remained in place under Saturn, were released when Saturn retreated to heaven. The two planets were crossing the Earth's orbit for about 300 years, passing close to Earth on average at intervals of 15 to 30 years. At that time, occasionally plasma from Mars comes into contact with the Earth, looking like a mountain that surrounded it. In the following years, people around the world began the construction of the pyramids in imitation of the disappeared mountain of Mars, in Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, the Andes, and in many other locations. The Greek word pyramid shows that it was used as a community pantry. Pyros, seed, plus amis, warehouse, makes pyramid. Stories have been recorded for these celestial events. There are precise descriptions of Saturn's rings and satellites, of Jupiter's cloud belts and satellites, of the Martian scarred surface and satellites, dating from antiquity in cultures around the world. Over the next 2,500 years, the inner planets entered the orbit of the Earth at rare intervals. 4 major incidents occurred. As is pointed out by almost all peoples in all continents, the most frightening incident occurred 5,350 years ago, when an alignment with Venus produced a shock. A huge plasmoid from Venus struck the Earth, and its axis tilted away from Sun temporarily, together with the rings that Earth had then above the equator. The electrical contact with rings made them red and caused their destruction. Bolts from Earth struck the rings. For the next 4,000 years, dust continued raining from the dissolution of these rings. And the toroidal equatorial plasma had hit the Earth's surface, causing months of torrential rains. For humankind, the sea of the Earth's equatorial ring in the southern sky had collapsed on Earth, and that fact almost everywhere was seen as a second deluge. In many peoples, the malevolent personified the crimson sky as mass slaughtering by dragons or raging goddesses, as Kali, Tiamat, Anath, Sekhmet, Hathor, etc. Altruist rescuers instead built Venus, Mars, and Jupiter calendars to warn of potentially dangerous planetary alignments. For this purpose, Thales of Miletus, who studied the attraction of electron, the amber, from which later originated the name of electricity, made a small planetarium. A later version of Thales Planetarium is the mainly planetary computer of Antiquity. Shortly after the huge downpour, Jupiter appeared again with his previous huge coma and the lower cloak, and the first appearing priesthoods presented him as if resurrected from the dead. Echoes of the falling rings and other circumstances still resonates in mythology and as today in various theologies, especially for the resurrection of Jews on the third day. 3,500 years ago, Venus had again an electrical contact with Earth, causing a crashing blow in the East Pacific. The strike was followed by an electric arc traveling through the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and part of India to the Mediterranean. Another devastating condition started at that time. Aggressive tribes moved from affected areas into new ones. Genocidal tribes of Central Asia and Middle East invaded India, Warless Asia Minor, Greece, and Italy. A last series of disasters broke 2,800 to 2,700 years ago by Mars and Mercury electric shocks to Earth. Those disasters were scattered over large areas from Central Asia to Western Mediterranean and up to today's Mexico and the southern United States. From the Persian Plateau to Greece, electric swaths 1,000 kilometers long tore citadels much more than any earthquake, with huge lightnings. The cities and citadels were buried under meters-high charred material shoveled with dirt. From that era probably the fire-walking and jumping over fire custom started as a reminder of overcoming those disasters. Bolsena town in Italy perished by lightning of a diameter greater than 8 kilometers, according to Pliny, who mentions it from earlier sources, where he writes for superbolts from Saturn and Mars. The ancient courageous rescuers, carriers of high altruistic cultures, who due to global disasters by cosmic invaders were forced to resort to mountains and caves, have left their warnings and their legacy in countless ways, through ancient ritual costumes and symbolic costumes, but mainly through prehistoric rock art around the world and by means of stories, even though some were altered. From the core of the narrative of the Titanomachy and the adventure of Phaethon, up to the great astronomer of antiquity Orpheus, describing his persecution on the top of Pangeo mountain by a celestial rotating dragon, and up to Perseus with the head of Medusa, the Gorgoneion, that with its cosmic rays was petrifying people, there are countless traditions that describe all these events and cosmic catastrophes on Earth, which today, only after research and the help of science, we have managed to slowly understand and to unlock their timeless and rescue messages. While the wounded humankind still suffers today from incurable at present consequences of those disasters, a selfless anti-fatalistic proposal for electromagnetic Earth shielding was made in 2011, and its implementation has already been started by a space research group led by Dr. Asher Bailey, chairman of the UNESCO Space Science Committee, Professor Phaethon, former dean of the NASA ISA International Space University, and the University of Texas professor Alexander, which promotes worldwide the proposal for international truce and repelling space threats, with colliding laser beams to be activated when we need to produce powerful plasma balls to repel such superstorms, causing downpours and stimulating magma, meteorites, asteroids or comets, whose the strong electric field may cause a devastating domino explosion of all nuclear, or also a devastating reversal of Earth's magnetic poles. The sooner we spread the solution, the sooner it will be implemented for the peaceful and optimistic survival of all humankind.